Hello, I'm Dr. Davis. I've come to know some wonderful nurses, and I've seen firsthand the stresses of your profession and the toll they can take on you. Living with that kind of stress can lead to frustration, fatigue, and the danger of burnout. But a few have escaped this situation. They found a way to feel an inner calm in spite of the stresses of their work. I'm going to tell you how you can do that too. First, I'll review 3 common problems many nurses face that cause them to struggle with stress, frustration, and fatigue. Then I'll explain how you can end these uncomfortable feelings permanently. That may sound improbable, but let me explain why I believe you can do this. Some years ago, when I was experimenting with self-hypnosis, I discovered a way to solve problems and end discomforts. I call this my inner guide. It's like having an inner friend. I'll be giving you many examples of what it can do. I've taught this to hundreds of people, some of them nurses, who've wanted relief from their stress, and they've been able to eliminate it with the help of their inner guides. I've referred to 3 common problems that many nurses have. First, most nurses are overworked. Many of you are finding that the demands on you are increasing and that it's hard to keep up with everything that you need to do. Second, under this pressure, you may find yourself falling back on unhealthy coping mechanisms because they seem most expedient. Third, you end up with painful emotions, not just frustration, but anxiety, irritation, depression, and sometimes guilt. If you're feeling any of these symptoms, I'd like to tell you how you can solve these problems. Let's start with the problem of being overworked. Being overworked makes you feel like you're just trying to survive, just trying to keep your head above water. Under these conditions, it's hard to gain the emotional distance you need to evaluate your situation and figure out how you can cope with it better. What you need is to gain the ability to see new solutions for this problem. For example, one nurse, wanting to provide the most compassionate care that she possibly could, spent so much time with her patients that she was chronically behind in her paperwork. With the help of her inner guide, she saw that she could give herself the time she needed to get her paperwork done, knowing that she would be called if an urgent need arose. Another person always responded to her coworkers' requests for coverage because she was a kind person and wanted to be helpful, but she often became so overworked that she got sick. She acquired an inner guide who helped her realize that she could take care of her own needs first, and she shouldn't always say yes to those who requested favors. As her health improved, she found that she had more energy for her work and began engaging in more active recreational activities. Another nurse, who was consistently behind with his paperwork, dealt with this problem by ignoring it. Eventually getting into trouble, he looked for help. He learned about and acquired an inner guide who helped him realize that he needed to learn how to type properly. As he practiced at home, he found that it was fun rather than a chore. Soon he was able to catch up and then keep up with his paperwork, and his focus shifted to thinking of ways he could improve procedures in the clinic. Each of these people's inner guides helped them to find better solutions for their situations. The inner guide's solutions for overwork are not the solutions you'd think of yourself. They're better. For example, a student was eager to finish school and begin her career, so she took extra courses. Her grades as well as her personal life suffered. Her solution was to stay up too late, trying to keep up with her commitments. She nearly collapsed and gave up. With her inner guide's help, she found herself becoming more patient. She realized she was pushing herself too hard and reduced her course load. As she relaxed, she began to enjoy the company of her fellow students as they moved through the materials at the same pace, sharing experiences. You can see that for these people, becoming aware of new solutions provided relief and the opportunity to progress with their lives. If they hadn't been able to do that, they'd have continued to be stuck with their problems and the stress that those problems caused indefinitely. And as we all know, stress increases morbidity and mortality. So if you have difficulty finding the new solutions that you need, the ultimate solution is to acquire your own inner guide. One thing you can do right now is to access the downloadable materials by clicking box 2. Fill out the first questionnaire entitled "What Makes You Uncomfortable?" It shows you how to identify the feelings and other discomforts that cause you distress, with possible solutions. Let's move on to the second common problem that causes nurses to struggle with stress, frustration, and fatigue, and that is unhealthy coping mechanisms. When you feel overwhelmed by stress, it's easy to turn toward overeating as the quickest way to soothe yourself, or to rationalize procrastinating as giving yourself a well-deserved break, or to assume that your family and friends will make allowances for your distraction or irritability. Under these conditions, unhealthy coping mechanisms too often become habits you can't undo. You depend on food for stress relief and can't help overeating. You depend on tomorrow being easier than today and can't help putting things off. You depend on the ongoing understanding of your family and friends. Even when faced with significant weight gain, an increasing backlog of uncompleted work, or deteriorating relationships, you still find yourself unable to change. But the real solution is to acquire effortless self-control. When you acquire this, you experience an effortless shift toward using solutions that are good for you, without having to struggle to exert self-discipline. If you feel that you don't have enough self-discipline to make needed changes, you'll appreciate the ease with which these changes can occur. I've seen it happen repeatedly for those who use their inner guides regularly. For example, I've known lots of people who were overeating, who wanted to lose weight and sometimes chose extreme diets to try to achieve this. Invariably, they were unable to stick to these diets and gain back any weight they'd lost. Those with inner guides have been helped to lose weight gently and sensibly, without resorting to extremes and without discomfort. One said, "When I go through the lunch line now, the hamburgers don't look appetizing. The salad does." One woman was constantly sleep-deprived because she developed a habit of staying up too late reading mysteries. This became a vicious cycle because the more subsequent fatigue she felt during the day, the less enjoyable her work was, and the more she looked forward to the mysteries at night. Her inner guide gradually caused this cycle to subside, and as the woman got adequate sleep, she was able to enjoy her work during the day. A number of people who acquired an inner guide began exercising. One explained that although it was initially a challenge to find the time, the exercise felt so good that he made it a priority. His enjoyment increased as he became increasingly competent at the exercises, and he was proud of his increased endurance during work. Each of these people experienced an effortless shift toward using solutions that were good for them, without having to struggle with self-discipline. You may wonder whether an inner guide takes over your life and robs you of your autonomy. It doesn't. If you're not ready for a change that it could make, or don't want that change, it doesn't happen. You're still in control. For example, a man divorced his mentally disturbed wife, but eager to find a mother for his children, he ignored the warnings of his inner guide and married a woman who began revealing troubling behaviors only after the wedding. He ended up divorcing her too. Finally, listening to his inner guide, he found and married a wonderful woman who has made him and his children very happy. If you don't change the way you're coping, your health, your work, and your relationships won't improve and will probably worsen over time. Your fatigue will not only drag you down, but as you know, it may cause mistakes that result in harm to patients, and they'll pick up on your feelings of frustration. That'll delay their healing, not to mention its impact on your own health. So if you're struggling with self-control, I imagine you'd like to acquire the ability to do so effortlessly. Of course, the definitive way to do this is to have your own inner guide. Another action you can take right now is to return to the downloadable materials and fill out the second questionnaire, entitled, How Do You Cope? You'll find in it a list of common unhealthy coping mechanisms. You can assess your dependence on them for yourself, along with how much effort it takes for you to steer clear of them. But right now, let's move on to the third common problem, painful emotions. When you feel chronically anxious, sad, irritated, angry, or guilty, you would really like to be rid of these feelings. And if they aren't eliminated, they'll tend to gradually worsen, leading to even more discomfort. The solution is to acquire your own inner guide. When you do, your painful emotions will gradually disappear. It just happens, easily and naturally. I've seen how inner guides can eliminate anger. A nurse I've worked with used to become so irritated when others made errors that she became unproductive until she blew off steam. With the help of her inner guide, she began to focus on her own performance instead of others. Over time, she came to calmly accept that errors will never be completely eliminated, and now when one occurs, she keeps a clear head and leads the search for solutions. I've also seen inner guides eradicate feelings of inadequacy and intense anxiety. A man I know suffered constant feelings of inadequacy because he continued to hear the voice of his critical father long after he'd grown up and left his parents' home. In fact, long after his father had died. Everything he did was criticized by this voice. After acquiring an inner guide, the voice gradually died away, and he gained a sense of being worthy and competent. In addition, his inner guide caused the intense anxiety he had felt at the prospect of going to the dentist to disappear. He was then able to get his teeth attended to. I've seen inner guides eliminate guilt. A woman I know had been plagued by guilt because she felt that she wasn't doing enough for her mother. After acquiring her inner guide, she realized that her mother's expectations were unrealistic, and her feelings of guilt gradually disappeared. She's now able to set limits on her mother and to choose which tasks she feels comfortable helping her with. If you're struggling with painful emotions now, it may be hard to believe they can be eliminated, but they can. You don't have to do it yourself. Your inner guide does it for you. For example, a woman who was anxious because she had difficulty managing her finances acquired an inner guide and wondered how she could tell it about this difficulty and asked for help with it. She didn't need to wonder. An inner guide, once acquired, immediately scans a person's mind, learns what the problems are, and works silently to solve them. The woman discovered to her surprise that she'd begun reassessing her financial situation and taking actions that would allow her to get out of debt and develop an effective investment strategy. If you acquire your inner guide, you'll solve all three of the problems I've described. Even if you're overworked, you'll be able to see new solutions for that situation. Even if you've been depending on unhealthy coping mechanisms, they'll be replaced by healthy ones, easily and naturally, without you having to struggle to exert self-control. And if you've been suffering with painful emotions, they'll gradually disappear, and you'll experience continuing emotional comfort. With these positive changes, you'll lead a comfortable and fulfilling life, and you'll find yourself realizing your full potential. I'd like to see you achieve this. You can start right now by clicking box 3 below. I look forward to introducing you to your own inner guide.